Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Trump gives a record-breaking State of the Union speech to Congress, but Democrats say he's offered no real solution to the nation's pressing challenges. Meanwhile, Iran looks to purchase Chinese-made supersonic missiles as military threats from the US continue. In the midst of regional tensions, Modi touches down in Israel to discuss defense and technology with Netanyahu. And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are in Jordan for a two-day visit focused on supporting refugees. President Trump has praised the American economy and his return to the White House in his State of the Union address. Speaking for approximately 1 hour and 48 minutes, the US president repeated his mission statement to bring back the golden age of America. Take a listen.
Members of Congress and my fellow Americans, our nation is back, bigger, better, richer, and stronger than ever before. You've seen nothing yet. We're going to do better and better and better. This is the golden age of America. Today, our border is secure. Our spirit is restored. Inflation is plummeting. Incomes are rising fast. The roaring economy is roaring like never before. And our enemies are scared. Our military and police are stacked. And America is respected again, perhaps like never before. And for all of these reasons, I say tonight, members of Congress, the state of our union is strong.
The bottom line is that I feel betrayed by my country. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it does need to return to the values that gave us our strength and humanity. If you want our leaders to be accountable, if you're devoted to the Constitution and the rule of law, if you want the United States of America to be worthy of your love, be ready to take this to the streets together, and we will take our country back.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined on Zoom by Al Arabiya editor Wissam Kayrouz, who joins us all the way from Riyadh, and broadcaster and journalist Isabel Webster, who joins us from Surrey in the UK. Wissam and Isabel, it's great to both have you on the show with me this evening. Wissam, let's start with you because, of course, Donald Trump's much-anticipated blockbuster State of the Union address was last night. What were the highlights and reactions to what the president had to say in that speech?
Well, the blockbuster wasn't a deception for a lot of, or a disappointment for a lot of people. It was really what it was supposed to be. It was symbolic, highly theatrical, and very Trumpy. And it was the lengthiest, the longest speech, State of the Union in the history, modern history of America. And Trump did actually say something that was so dear to his heart. He said that we are in a turnaround economy, that he is now playing a historical role in turning around the economy of the biggest economy in the world, which is the United States, and that his country is stronger than ever. Of course, his opponents are far from believing this or believing that whatever he said was correct, but he was speaking in front of a largely surrendering Republican floor in the same time. But when it comes to geopolitics, when it comes to the big questions, when it comes to Iran, it was very concise, very short, maybe a couple of minutes for Iran, which, by the way, we as newsrooms around the world were bracing for a huge announcement, something that takes us, or that can be a little bit more conclusive on this big build-up of firepower around Iran. On immigration, he was stating what he was saying all the time. On tariffs, he was saying that his very own policy on tariffs is the reason why America and the stock market is doing so well again. These are the big moments of Trump within the lengthiest State of the Union. And on the other side, it was very, we have just listened to Robert De Niro, who was talking about this and speaking about what he called state of the swamp, which is very ironic, knowing that one of Trump's earliest slogans was cleaning the swamp, which is Washington in his jargon.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And a lot of analysts today, Wissam, have been picking up on that State of the Swamp event that happened. And a lot of people are saying there doesn't appear to be any democratic resistance at the moment to Donald Trump's White House and the Republican Party. And they just can't seem to galvanize that opposition against President Donald Trump. So lots of questions after we heard Robert De Niro speak there. But Isabel, Wissam did bring up the fact that Donald Trump touched on foreign policy. It actually took him an hour and 5 minutes to do so. Many of us weren't expecting that because foreign policy has dominated so much of a second presidency. But Iran is now accusing the US of spreading big lies after Trump's State of the Union address. What more do we know about what Iran is saying?
Well, Iran, even though Trump touched on them for about 3 minutes, still were hugely offended by what was said by Trump. And he did make some new allegations, even though it was long speech indeed. And some of the comments he made, he accused the Shia clerics of being the wild sponsors of terrorism. He described them as spreading nothing but terrorism, death and hate. And he talked about them building these missiles that could soon reach the United States, which presumably is what they are claiming is the spreading of lies. He also said that his preference was to solve this whole issue through diplomacy. Now, there are obviously huge questions, and as Wissam was saying there, we were all sort of holding our breath. And in fact, we have been, haven't we, for several weeks about whether or not this will happen, whether there will be a big offensive in Iran. And, he hinted today, or last night rather, at regime change, but we're not really any clearer on what his policy is. What we do know is that, this year started off with an offensive in Venezuela. We've also seen his threats in Greenland. So when he's talking about diplomacy, I think it is fair to ask the question if that actually is diplomacy in the traditional sense of the word, or if actually that is about Trump weighing up a decision about whether or not there is going to be regime change in Iran, or if there is something that he can get out of this. Now, the third round.
Isabel, we just... Oh, sorry, start again. We just appear to be having some problems with your connection, but I can hear you now.
Sorry.
No problem at all. We've got you back.
I'm out in the countryside here, and usually it's fine, but it can be a bit... I don't know how far I got into it, but essentially I'm saying we didn't know much more about what his policy was after that speech. But, looking at how his playbook has played out this year, there are concerns that when he says his preference is diplomacy, we're not really any the wiser of what that means. And it's not necessarily diplomacy in the traditional sense that you or I might expect it, where you've got high level, career diplomats trying to negotiate things on a rule-based international order. His idea of diplomacy, as we have seen with Greenland and Venezuela, is to try and get something out of it to the advantage of his MAGA base at home in the United States. This America First approach, but also, very much pushing the boundaries on international law. So he will be exploring whether or not there is any advantage to him in this. At the moment, we know that there are a huge number of American assets and naval. And as a result, there are suspicions that this is very much like 2003, just before the invasion of the Gulf. But Iran have had their regime accusing the Trump administration of being like Goebbels from the Hitler era for spreading disinformation and lies, which doesn't bode well ahead of those talks in Geneva tomorrow.
Wissam, what would you like to say? Because I've just seen a line now breaking across the news wires that Iran's foreign minister has arrived in Geneva now ahead of those talks that Isabel was just telling us about.
Well, we know that whatever talks that will happen tomorrow in Geneva will be very, very important, because it's going to be the time when America could decide eventually whether this whole negotiation process is to lead anywhere, or whether they are actually giving the Iranians an offer that they cannot refuse, but they cannot accept, and that would lead eventually to war. Having said this, the core of Trump's policy remains non-interventionist. The voters of Trump, they don't want to see America get involved in wars. But at the same time, when you move two of your biggest warships to the region, the operation cost of these two ships is somewhere near $600,000 every hour, just for making it work. I'm not talking about the weapons or about the salaries, only to make these ships work. When you have 50 to 60% of your movable air power all engaged in one operation, you cannot just forget about it. He needs to get something out of it. Now it is building up. There is the possibility of war is still likely, but it's not, for sure, of course. And we do believe, and we were discussing this before we just went on air, that we are not sure if Trump has made his mind really about making this war. But at the same time, we know what he wants. We know his modus operandi. We know the pattern of what he wants. What he wants is being able to claim a victory very quickly, to say that I made something spectacular, that I obliterated my enemy, and that I can claim now that I'm a victor, and I made something for the Americans, which I believe the Iranians are making sure right now to make him know very clearly that this won't be possible right now. And if he eventually waits that he cannot make what he wants, then it will be a much harder decision. Is he ready to go to 6, 7, 8 weeks of wars, or maybe 4 or 5, something that would make him much closer to his bases, to the elections, the midterms elections? This is a big question. And I guess the Iranians are playing this game exactly, dragging him into an area where making this war will be very, very costly. But in all cases, this actual state cannot stay forever. It has to be conclusive sometimes. You cannot keep all this fleet, all this firepower waiting without, he needs to get something in return, or it's going to be war.
Stay right there, because we're going to move on to another story now which directly links to this. And reports claim Iran and China are close to a deal on supersonic anti-ship cruise missiles as the US continues to threaten an attack against Iran. The Chinese-made CM-302 missiles have a range of around 290 kilometers and can fly low and fast. If delivered, they would have the capability to strike the US naval fleet currently deployed to the Middle East. So, Isabel, as I was saying, these stories directly link to each other. When did China and Iran actually begin talks on this deal? And what exactly does it entail? Because we also just spoke about the fact Iran's foreign minister has arrived in Geneva for those talks.
Yeah, well, look, it's really impossible to know the details. Reportedly, the deal has been in the offing for around 2 years, but we're not going to hear from the Iranian regime to confirm that, and we're certainly not going to hear that from China either. We know that Iran became increasingly concerned after their 12-day war with Israel last June, and they really wanted to try to finalize the deal. We know that these supersonic anti-ship missiles would be a game changer for them in the region, not least when they feel that they have, the wagon circling, if you like. As you described, they're fast and low. They can be launched from far away, something like 290 kilometers. And this would really be a threat to US and allied assets in the region. And according to weapons experts, it would materially complicate operations completely in the Gulf and could be a game changer. So no surprises then. We've had increased sanctions announced today from the Trump administration on, I think it is around 30 individuals, but also on vessels and on possible deals to try and crush this, not only to stop them expanding their capabilities, but to stop them being able to sell oil and effectively put unbearable pressure onto Iran to bring them to the negotiating table. Now, obviously, when you've got the comments being made by Trump at the State of the Union address last night, you've got these sanctions being put in place. This does not bode well for those talks that are happening tomorrow. But I go back to my point before about what really is Trump wanting from this. And, you know, you look at how he's dealing with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and there, his solution, many people would say, is not a ceasefire, it's surrender from Ukraine. It's the ceding of territory. Look at what happened in Venezuela, and it comes back to what Wissam was saying about this short, sharp, headline-grabbing change by taking Maduro, but what's in place is somebody else from the same regime. It's not meaningful. And so there's no meaningful plan, I don't think, at the moment in relation to Iran. But what is certain is that they do not want them to get any stronger. Now, Trump is right in saying that, you know, it would be dangerous for them as a nuclear power to gain any more strength. And so, you know, a lot of people will be supportive of trying to stop this deal with China. But it is of a concern, and, you know, it's a one to watch. But as I say, at the moment, we don't know how many missiles, we don't know the financing terms, we don't know the timeline. We just, it also materially changes the involvement of China in all of this as well. And we just had our UK Prime Minister out in China, we are seeing a mass. We don't have, again, as Wissam was saying, we were talking before we came on air, but we don't have the traditional East and West axes anymore. It seems to be following the money, and, you know, Trump's calling the shots at the moment.
Yeah, Wissam, and let's pick up right where Isabel left. I mean, this China-Iran deal could have massive ramifications. Do we know what impact it could have on the current talks happening between the US and Iran? And is this a way of Iran posturing and having some leverage ahead of those talks?
Well, two little background points on this very interesting story. First, there is a thing between Iran and the ability to be able to destroy ships at sea. One of Iran's greatest moments, or what do they believe are their greatest moments, is when Hezbollah was able in late July 2006 to hit directly a mighty Israeli ship at sea that was called Sa'ar. It was one of the biggest moments of Hezbollah/Iran. And just 3 or 4 days ago, we heard Khamenei himself saying that America can well bring the biggest ships in the world to our surrounding, but they have to keep in mind that maybe we can sink these ships. And so this is very much in the psychology. Now, if China is to give Iran such a strategic leverage at sea, it will be a major shift in the Gulf deterrence. It won't be only with the Americans, but with all the other players in the Gulf, most notably the Arabs and the Saudis, which, by the way, were directly involved in a rapprochement and appeasement with the Iranians through the Chinese themselves. Second, we will have a much higher risk to choke points, which is the Hormuz Strait and the Bab el-Mandab Strait, which were in the last couple of decades the major, conflict points in this region. And at the same time, it will deepen China's involvement in very hardcore geopolitical terms, which I don't believe are really going for that right now. Let's not forget that the Americans, Trump himself, was not very mean with the Chinese. Okay, we have the tariff wars and everything, but on geopolitical terms with the Russians, with the Chinese, it wasn't an idea about West and East, like we're just saying. There is no more NATO, no more European Union, nothing. It's always bilateral. And a proxy warfare now in the region, China getting involved in this, won't be very beneficial for Beijing. But at the same time, if it happens, and if really we do believe that these kind of missiles, if they are to be sold to the Iranians, it's going to be right now, effective now. It's not that like the American deals, it's going to take years and to be delivered. So if it happens, it's a big game changer in the region, and it's going to be a bigger pressure on the Americans to make it as much conclusive as possible very soon.
Thank you so much for your thoughts there. Let's move on to another story now. And India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Israel as he looks to deepen relations between the two nations. The two leaders are expected to discuss AI and defense as tensions between the United States and Iran do rise. Take a listen.
For the last few years, India has been the fastest growing major economy in the world. Soon, we will be among the top 3 economies globally. At the same time, Israel is a powerhouse of innovation and technological leadership.
So, Wissam, we just heard there from Narendra Modi, who was addressing the Knesset a little bit earlier on his 2-day trip to Israel. What came out of day one of his visit?
Well, it's a continuation, if not an embodiment of this love story, if we can call it, between Modi's India, the Hindu nationalist India, and Israel, which is a big thing in the world right now. And from India's point of view, it's also something they use into the narrative of their rivalry with Pakistan and everything. And from Israel's point of view also, it's very important. Let's not forget that India is the one country that everyone is trying to get close to recently. You have seen the French president, for example, in India. We have seen a lot of from everyone. Everyone wants India's favor. And apparently it's because India is growing so fast. It is becoming, as Narendra Modi just said, one of the top 3 economies in the world very soon. The first day of Modi in Israel was warm politically, very clear warm relation with Benjamin Netanyahu. There was a clear focus on security, defense, and the two countries' favorite subject, counterterrorism cooperation. Also, we saw Modi's address to the Knesset. It was nothing short than historical and in the context of the bilateral relation. Also, there was a very clear focus on technology, on innovation. 2 countries, one country which is the biggest country in the world when it comes to number of citizens, and a very small, strong player, which is Israel, both sharing this vision about power through technology, through innovation, and through artificial intelligence. And all this, of course, comes within a geopolitical context. We know the Iran story and the Gaza story. It's all ongoing. And Israel has every benefit to have India on its side within this context.
Yeah, Wissam, you're absolutely right, because we saw that bromance between Macron and Modi, and then we just see that big hug between Modi and Netanyahu. Everyone's trying to get in India's favour. But Isabel, how has the global community reacted to Modi engaging with Netanyahu, given that he had actually condemned the October the 7th attacks? It's quite an interesting moment because he's also faced criticism at home, Modi.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of the first world leaders to condemn the Hamas attack, which in itself Indian foreign policy has changed, because up until Modi came to power, they had been, as a nation, very much sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, if you like. And Modi has much more been sympathetic to Israel. And, whilst they still continue to officially support the two-state solution, there has been no mention of it since the conflict began on October the 7th. There's been no call for restraint. In fact, there's just been a deepening and a strengthening of their relationship. Unsurprisingly, that is controversial in the light of what we know has unfolded in Gaza. I mean, the International Criminal Court have an arrest warrant out for Benjamin Netanyahu. And there are, of course, people at home who are unsupportive in India of Modi's position. But it also has concerned Pakistan, because we know that the reason India is spending so much on intelligence sharing and strategic weaponry, particularly around military hardware, $1 billion a year, I believe, from Israel, this sort of Iron Dome technology, is because they had this short war with Pakistan last May. So Pakistan sees this as a threat to their security, this meeting an ongoing escalation, really, in terms of their relationship. But also, you've got the United Nations, where we have been historically used to seeing India siding with those who have criticized Israel for humanitarian breaches, for overstepping the mark. And that has materially changed with Modi in power. And this is just a further demonstration of that strengthening relationship, really, and it looks as though, certainly I would say, under the Trump administration, that, Netanyahu's position has become less of a pariah. I mean, it's been a whole journey, hasn't it? Obviously, there was the initial condemnation after October the 7th, but there's been this sort of consensus, hasn't there, largely that they've gone too far, one that I don't think Trump shares. And clearly Modi doesn't either.
And it's absolutely fascinating. Wissam, I don't know if you want to comment, but we have been on a journey, haven't we, Isabel, when it comes to Israel? Wissam, all yours?
Of course. What a journey, and it is still unfolding. But at the same time, there are major changes happening in the world, most notably in America. We also have to remember that the American angle on Israel is slightly changing under Trump. It's not Israel first, it's America first. And when it comes to, big players like India, it has a different, it's about nationalism. It has a completely different dynamic. It's about interest, and it's about rivalry with Pakistan, which is, of course, a big Muslim nuclear nation, which is also seen very much as a threat in Israel. Let's not forget that Israel is also eyeing the fact that there is a certain Sunni powers, also Islamic Sunni powers, that are rising in the world, and not always very friendly with Israel.
Thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Stay right there, and we're going to move on to another story now. And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex met children at a refugee camp and a hospital in Jordan as part of a 2-day visit. Harry and Meghan arrived in Amman for their first international visit together in 18 months. The pair are expected to engage with the World Health Organization and meet with teams that are coordinating food relief for Gaza from Jordan. Isabel, we haven't spoken about Meghan and Harry in a while, and they're back on the scene. What brings the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to the Middle East and the Gulf region, and of course, Jordan?
Well, we've seen them, haven't we, ringside at basketball matches and things, but we haven't seen them doing this kind of, I suppose, what you'd call a sort of royal, what used to be a state visit when they still work for the royal family, but they haven't done this sort of trip, which very much mirrors the kind of humanitarian roles that they used to take on through patronages and the soft power of the royal family. But here they are at the invitation of the World Health Organization, and as you say, trying to shine a light on humanitarian issues. Jordan, a fascinating country in the Middle East that has taken a disproportionate number of displaced people from within its country, from beyond its borders as well, and has managed very impressively to tread a very peaceful path and manage to maintain good relations with the countries around it so far. So that's not a surprise that they've chosen to go to a country that's sort of seen as neutral. It also has a widely respected royal family there as well. But, it's among the things they're doing. They're visiting a refugee camp, but they're also going to see medical evacuees from Gaza. And whilst they have been at pains to stress that this is a humanitarian visit, I think anything to do with Gaza will be seen by some as implicitly political and as taking a position. Obviously, they are very keen to be seen to be doing good, to be promoting mental health awareness for people who are displaced, all the sorts of causes that we'd expect them to be associated with. But from my point of view, I think it's just fantastic not to see Meghan, repackaging crackers or filling up jam pots, but actually using her profile to do something really worthwhile on a global stage. I think it's great to see them out and about and doing something good.
And it was so interesting because I was just thinking about their visit and maybe how the royal family might feel about it, because they're currently facing a crisis at home when it comes to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. And then we see Meghan and Harry on this trip to Jordan and the Middle East. So a lot of dynamics happening here. But Wissam, Harry's trip to the Middle East actually comes weeks after his brother, of course, Prince William, was in Saudi Arabia, where he met young female footballers in Riyadh. He also met the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. What does that tell you about the royals and basically their effect in the region?
Well, I have been following the trip of Prince William to the region, to Saudi Arabia, and I can tell you it was very successful in terms of media coverage, in terms of perception. He had some of the greatest photo ops he could ever possibly have in this region, especially in Al Ula, also with young football players. It was perfect, and definitely it was much less of a controversy or a talk or a conversation starter like when you talk about Meghan and Prince Harry. So now we can see that the Sussexes have been involved in something with the World Health Organization. They were invited by Tedros Adhanom himself, and they are trying to do something good, as Isabel was saying, and this is very well. At the same time, it comes as the royal family probably had their biggest crisis in decades when it comes to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the ex-prince, and they are trying to manage the image problem in many ways. Now, I don't see this visit to Jordan having any implications on this, but I can see that in Jordan and the Middle East, the Sussexes are facing a much friendlier ground and crowd than anywhere else in the world.
It's a school of thought, Wissam, if I may be so bold as to say, as a Brit, you talk there about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor being the biggest sort of scandal or threat to the monarchy in decades. I'd say in my lifetime, probably in centuries. And perhaps being unkind, you could say Harry and Meghan have sensed that actually people are beginning to think we're not the bad apples in the royal family. We're just a young couple trying to find our way. We're still doing good work out here. Actually, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor might have perhaps changed people's perceptions of them, if that's not too ungenerous of me to suggest. It's a school of thought.
Well, that's really interesting to hear this from you as well. That's very interesting. That if you put things, it's very interesting, Isabel. If you put things in perspective, you are absolutely right. Whatever thing people have against the Sussexes, which is very tabloidy and very, small talk, this looks really not very nasty compared to what we are talking about in the case of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
And they could actually conversely be an asset to the royal family, because as I was alluding to, I think there is a crisis of the monarchy at the moment. I think a lot of people are looking at whether or not taxpayers' money was used for, things that they shouldn't have been used for. And there are questions around that. And suddenly people might be thinking, I remember Harry. Harry's a bit of a legend, wasn't he? He could end up one day coming back into the fold. Who knows? But it's a really interesting juxtaposition, because whilst they're having this crisis at home, I don't think Harry's doing them any harm at all.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Go on, Wissam.
Do you mind if I ask a question? Maybe because, I can get the perspective of Isabel. So the common understanding in the UK right now about how the royal family and the king dealt with this crisis. Are people satisfied in general? Do you think, the reaction, what the king said, the reaction, was it what they expected?
Yeah, I can't possibly tell you what most people think, but I can tell you that I think there's certainly a mood that is supportive of the king. I think that his statement was pretty powerful. And I think most people understand that short of an act of parliament, they can't, he can't remove him from the line of succession. But I do think that people are reevaluating their opinions. The fact that you're even asking that question goes to show it's up for discussion, something that probably during the Queen's tenure, certainly in my memory, maybe there were more crises when I was little, but in latter years, there was nothing but fondness. So people are making those calculations. And at the moment, I think that Prince William and King Charles are still commanding the affections of the nation, but that's not to say that might not change. Who knows what might come out of these investigations? And I don't think Andrew has done.
And I think, Isabel, one thing to say also, Wissam, just as we wrap up this conversation, I think many people were surprised the King's statement came out so swiftly after Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's arrest.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people were waiting longer. You remember it was always never complain, never explain. And then all of a sudden there seems to be a change in the royal rhetoric that's been happening.
It was always too little, too late before.
Yeah, good argument. Yeah. But thank you so much.
Let me state clearly were his words. The law must take its course. Nobody is above the law. And that was really powerful. Not that long ago, the royal family were above the law, really. So, he played a blinder, really, for a terrible phrase, but, he did handle that very well. I should stress at this point, Andrew does deny all allegations against him and does not accept that he's been involved in anything at this point. And he hasn't been charged with anything. He was arrested and released.
Yeah, always said that he was innocent in all of this. But thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Now, it's that time of the show where Isabel and Wissam have chosen two of their quirkiest stories of the day. Isabel, we're going to talk about yours because it's a new discovery a scientist has made about dinosaurs. I used to be absolutely obsessed with dinosaurs, so this is a great topic for me.
Well, apparently if you're obsessed with dinosaurs, that's a sign of high intelligence, and neither of my
That's not true.
So I was always worried by that fact.
It is true.
If anyone's ever watched Jurassic Park, you'll remember the sort of earthquake as the footsteps of the T-Rex made its way towards the sort of, the height of the film. But new research has revealed that actually they were very, very light on their feet. They collected lots of data around their anatomy, around their tracks, and also around bird movement, because the T-Rex actually resembles in many ways a bird of prey. And they now believe that the T-Rex actually walked around permanently, this 7-ton apex predator, on its tiptoes, which doesn't really play into the sort of kind of, Jurassic Park idea that we all have of this highly efficient and lethal, vicious dinosaur, that it was running around on tiptoes. But this new research has also revealed that they were faster than we previously realized. This is from the College of the Atlantic in Maine, United States. And they are 20% faster than originally thought, with a top speed of 25 miles an hour, which is 40 kilometers an hour. And apparently the positioning of their feet would actually have allowed them to balance the huge weight of their teeth, where they have these huge sort of banana-sized teeth, and obviously famous for their crushing bite. And these animals were 40 feet tall, so it's always fascinated me, the T-Rex, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, but this insight that they were actually running around on their twinkle toes does make me smile.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like a ballerina.
Yeah. But I think it's fascinating because, like you say, T-Rex has always been the thing that we're all scared of. If you talk about Jurassic Park, you always imagine them to be really heavy on their feet. But I think it's more frightening that they're actually faster and they're more nimble than we ever expected, because that would have made them an absolutely deadly predator, as we know they were.
Absolutely.
And Wissam, I want to talk to you about your story, because it's all about this person called Chando Tan, and he comes from Singapore. He's gone viral, and I was told that we had to do this story because he's a good-looking man, apparently.
I mean, he's good looking, obviously, but he is looking very, very young for his real age. If you imagine this man that we are seeing now on the screen is 59 years old, and he just looks like someone who is 25 or 26. And he does say that he did not go through any medical procedures, nothing, only what he calls discipline in lifestyle, discipline in eating, and in sports. Now, we know, of course, about a very famous American businessman who is paying somewhere like $4 million a year to inject himself with the blood of his sons to stay young. And he does look very young. It's exactly the same case, which leads us to believe maybe this gentleman from Singapore is not being completely transparent about his protocol on youth. But, wanting to be young is something I believe is legitimate, is universally accepted, and it's going to be a huge business very soon. It's going to be a $1 trillion business very soon. We're going to see clinics all around the world. Rejuvenation is the name of the game in the next decade or two. So people, they want to stay young, they want to stay beautiful, and I do believe this is legitimate and okay, as long as we accept that, we also do die in the end. That will make the story a little bit less comedy.
But I would just say it is a privilege to age, and we shouldn't be afraid of getting old because many people don't get the chance to. But I would add to that when I was pregnant, I never looked better. And I'm not talking about being skinny or whatever, but I just had that glow. People talk about the pregnancy glow. And there is this theory that the stem cells that are the fountain of youth, they are creating a baby within you, are the secret to looking young. So I do understand why there is so much pound dollar research into stem cells and technology of injecting whatever it might be to keep you young, because my own experience was it was just transformative. When I was literally creating life, I genuinely looked younger.
Well, I can't reflect on that, but I would say something. I'm all about the rejuvenation game. If you know me, you know what I mean. Any doctor that can make me look younger, I'm basically going to them.
You know where I am.
Yeah, you know where I am. I've got the contact details. But I think it's so fascinating now because when I look at how age groups shift, the age group I'm in now, when my mother was that age, they felt really old. But now we've got sports, technology, food, you name it, and, some other help by other things, which I think is just fascinating. And it's really changing the game for how you can preserve your body, you can play sport, you can look after yourself. There's so much science behind it now. So it's going to be, I'll be all about the biohacking my age until I can.
But happiness is always the most important.
100.
Love it. I would just say the one thing
and
that
purpose will make us young and beautiful.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, well, Wissam's saying happiness and purpose, but Wissam, I will say something that I don't want to age disgracefully. So, I can be happy. That's my purpose, to look young.
That's not happening anytime soon for you, Leigh-Ann, that's for sure.
I would agree.
Oh, well, it's been so great to have you both on. Thanks to our guest this evening, Al Arabiya editor Wissam Kayrouz, who is in Riyadh, broadcaster and journalist Isabel Webster, who joined us all the way from Surrey in the UK. And that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, follow us on X. G&T will be coming up next. Goodbye, good evening, and thank you for watching.